Welcome to our missions meeting tonight. Glad y'all all could come. This is Worship in the Round, but I thought it would be just an incredible opportunity to highlight missions through personal testimonies. And these are the leaders. Does this represent all the leaders out of the two teams? We're missing a couple. All right, Katie Matthews. But interestingly, the leadership formed out of these two teams. It came together. Besides Katie, all of you go to Anchorage Grace Church, and that happened out of the providence of God, not for any particular reason, but that's the way God designed it. And I'm curious, though, out of that video, which was very stirring to me, maybe we could begin by and you don't all have to answer every question, but maybe a couple of you could answer, what drew you to do this? Like, this was a pretty big sacrifice to prep, to do like two meetings every week, right? Preparation meetings coming up to the time, selecting students, interviewing students, going through skits. I mean, you all have a pretty busy life. I know all of your lives, so you all do have a very busy life. So fitting something like that into your life, why'd you do it?
I didn't know I was doing it. I was signed up to do it. But and at first I had a lot of apprehension. Most of it came from not knowing what it would be like. And I didn't know the commitment and all the meetings that would be happening. I didn't know that either. I was like, what? But wow, we needed all of that. We needed all that and more. And then we discovered, that's not enough. We need to find blocks of hours in a row so that we can practice these skits. So even those 2 meetings a morning, that wasn't adequate. So we had to find other chunks of time. But man, it was so worth every bit of time just to see. I think what was really interesting to me is you get a group of kids that I really only knew 2 of the kids going into it that were on my team. I didn't even know the kids' names for a while. And then you just get to know them, and then you just get put together on this team. And I kind of thought, this is like Survivor. Because you just don't know who you're going to be with. And you get with this team, and then you're just working hard, and sometimes it's challenging.
Wait, what is Survivor? Just kidding. So you're just saying you didn't know what you were getting into until you got into it.
I didn't, but it was super interesting, though, to see throughout the trip why the Lord put certain kids on the team. And it was just like, wow, okay, you're really shining right there. And this child's really shining right here. So it was really...
So you found out why you were doing it after you were doing it. The Lord blessed you.
Once we got going, I was like, okay.
All right. Next student. Yeah.
Randy asked me, or either I asked Randy, I can't remember.
Okay, good.
And so...
No, just kidding.
Yeah, so it was just an opportunity that came up, and it wasn't anything that I had a dream about or a desire to do really until the opportunity came up. And God works through our circumstances and opportunities that He gives us to be able to do things that we wouldn't otherwise think that we'd ever get an opportunity to do. So it was just providence of God. That's what I have to say. It sounds like a spiritual answer, but it is.
God just opened the door.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I just wanted a vacation with my wife in the islands. So.
Okay, yeah, that works.
He's so good to me. There was a mom that had been multiple times before, and for some reason, she couldn't go this year. And so I just, without knowing really what I was, signing up for, I said, I'll go. And I think, obviously the Lord had it in mind, and it worked out. And it was really neat to minister with my husband, because that hasn't happened much in our married life, just because 5 kids and, you do your thing and I'll do mine. So it was nice. That was, I guess that was one reason why I was motivated to say, pick me.
So when this came up, Randy reached out to Ethan first about doing it, as he is a missions kid. But I personally had never been on a missions trip before. So when Ethan mentioned it, I was like, cool, have fun. Go for it. I'll just be home. I'll hold down the fort. I'll be at work. It's the same old. But Ethan challenged me, and he asked, don't you want to go too? We could go together. And I was like, yeah, no, it's okay. And he was like, you answered too fast. Pray about it. And I was like, okay, I'll pray about it. But the more that I prayed about it and thought about it, I could have just stayed here, helped with the school, stayed there. But it was really an awesome, humbling opportunity to go and to go see the villages and bring the gospel there. Again, I've never been on a mission trip before. I've never had an opportunity to do so. And so it was like, okay, sure. So that's how I ended up getting into it.
I'd probably give 2 reasons. I guess first would be just the theological reason of missions and just the honor it is. As Psalm 67 says, that's what that song you guys heard, let the nations be glad, may the peoples praise you. God will reach all the nations one day. Like we can't stop that mission. That's a wonderful thing that the Lord's going to accomplish. But Romans 10 talks about that, how blessed are the feet of those who carry good news, right? Who take that good news. And so it's an honor for us as God's children, as the elect, to be a part of that. So there's perhaps just that excitement, the joy of being used by God in that. But the other reason would just be a personal providential one. Like Jamila said, I grew up in missions. My parents are still missionaries in Wales. And actually the whole reason the 2 of us are in Alaska right now is because originally I was supposed to lead a Go team from the Masters University. And I think we have another one coming up like next week or this week. Okay. Tuesday. Okay.
So,
yeah.
In 24 hours,
Oh,
something.
wow, that's awesome. So originally I was supposed to lead one of those teams up here, and COVID canceled mine. I missed out. Big bummer. But I moved up instead. And originally, as a part of that plan, when we were going to come out here, we were going to go and visit the villages. So there was still this kind of yearning to get to be a part of that, to experience the culture, but really it's for the gospel was probably the biggest reason. It's just an honor to take that.
That's great. Hey, well, how did you guys select students? Do people sign up and get interviewed, and then we don't have to take too long on that, but I think it's important to think about how did it come about?
Yeah, we have an application process, so they fill out an application, and we read through it, and then we interview students and go with it that way.
And what are the ages? Do they have to be in 10th grade?
High school.
High school, so
High
9th
school,
grade
yeah.
through 12th. That's great. And okay, so 4 villages. Let's just talk about them. Do we have the
Blake? There we go.
So Nulato is
Okay.
where?
Nulato's about right here. It's on the Yukon River.
And then where's Koyuk?
Koyuk is right here. This is Norton Sound. Unalakleet's here. Nome is about there. And this is Koyuk right there.
Makoryuk, where's that?
This is St. Lawrence Island, and Makoryuk is on the very tip right here. Did I get it right? Did I say Makoryuk?
Gamble's up there.
I am sorry, Gamble. I apologize.
Gamble.
Thank you for keeping me. Yeah, so this is St. Lawrence Island. This is Gamble. I'm sorry. Gamble is here, and Savunga's right here. There's only 2 villages on the island, and so Gamble's about 35 miles from the coast of Russia and about 200 miles from Nome.
Okay, and then where's Makoryuk?
This is Nunivak Island right here, and Makoryuk's about right here.
So you had 2 trips. One trip goes inland to Nulato, right?
Nulato on the Yukon River.
And
yep.
then they went to where? So Nulato, and then down to Makoryuk, and then
Koyuk.
Koyuk, okay. And then, all right, take us through it. So, whose trip went where?
Okay, so our team, it was Sandy and I and Katie Matthews, we went to Nulato first.
Which is?
Nulato's on the Yukon.
Okay, right there.
Yeah.
And then you went where after?
And then after that, we went to Koyuk.
Okay.
Which is on the Koyuk River right there.
So Nulato and Koyuk. And then Randy's team went to Gamble first, and then where? Okay. Wow. So 2 coastal, and islands. 2 islands. That's why you made the joke about taking your wife to the islands. I got it. And what are there about 200? There's 250 villages splayed throughout the state of Alaska. So hitting 4 of them is pretty good with a team of this size and strategic. And maybe describe each village and the receptivity and the atmosphere of each one.
Okay, so our first trip was to Nulato, and a couple interesting things about Nulato is Nulato's on the Yukon. I had never seen the Yukon, and the Yukon, if you've never seen it, is huge. It's very interesting. The city of Nulato, the original town, it's not really a city. There's only about maybe 200 people, if that, 250 who live there. But the original residents have been moved up the hill a ways because of the flooding of the Yukon. But what's really interesting, the school itself sits probably less than 50 yards from the river itself. And so, you know, it's built up on stilts a little bit, but if it floods, it's still going to get to the school. But when we left, the weather was really bad. It was like snowing. There was no visibility whatsoever. So we take off and we get out of Anchorage and it clears up. And so we land in Nulato. It's negative 18. Then the wind chill factor made it even colder than that. The principal there at Nulato, this was her first year there. She's from Louisiana. Her name's Mary Chapman. Yeah, welcome to Alaska, right? And this is her second career. And so it's an odd situation. She has two of her sons there, and her husband and her other two older sons are back in Louisiana because he started a job. So she's there, a mom with two kids just by herself. She is a believer. And so that was really nice. That was her first year. Something to keep in mind, though, she may be leaving after this year. And so keep that in mind, to pray that God would send somebody receptive in that position, that we would be able to go back to Nulato.
So you encouraged her.
Yeah.
You encouraged her. What was the atmosphere like, though, at that village? Like, well received, or was it kind of harsh? Or
No. It's and a lot of times you don't think until you go, though. So Nulato's gym, nowhere near as big as this, but they have the same kind of flooring. The school building's fairly new, but it's hard to get people to come into the villages to work, especially educators or anybody else, like especially in Nulato. So they've not had a maintenance person or a janitor since last May. And so this is her first year there, so she's trying to make sure everything runs and is kept up, but there was not a whole lot kept up. So later on, I guess we can talk about it now. We did a lot of maintenance, cleaning and stuff for them. They had a floor machine that they didn't know how to use, so we were able to use the floor machine to clean all their floors in the school, and we fixed some things and put together some things, hauled off a bunch of trash. That was that little video you saw the kids jumping in the back of the truck, right, crushing boxes with their bodies. But very receptive. It's not like when we came in, they were not shunning us. They were not as exuberant or very social, in the sense of, like, if you walk down our hallways at our school here at Grace Christian, you have kids say, hello, good morning. At Nulato, it wasn't like that. They really didn't say anything to you till you got to know them.
I heard just talking before that some villages are more Christianized because they have a church witness, and some are not. Would this be one that was, or
no?
Was
Nulato
not?
Nulato really doesn't have a church presence, in the sense it has a Catholic church building, but no one really goes to church. So there's no real gospel presence, except for there's a missionary there.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a husband-wife?
Husband-wife and children team. They've been there for about 6 years.
How many kids do they have?
They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're fixing to have their 6th in the village.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Where are they from?
They're sending churches from one of the churches on the peninsula, but they're from the lower 48 originally.
Okay. And you had some interaction with them.
Had some interaction with them. John and Mariana are their names. Casey, the last name. And so when they first came out, and Nulato's not a place that you'd want to go. It's not like, well, I'll be a missionary and people will pay me, I'll get support from churches and I'll go hang out in this cool place. Nulato is probably not a place you'd want to hang out. Everybody that's there wants to leave. And he's wanting to stay. So when they first came to the village in Nulato, before they even moved in, there was a fire that had broke out there. So John flew in and helped them fight the fire, which was an automatic win for him, in the sense of the people there accepting him. So they've lived there now for about 6 years. The village knows that he's a missionary, but he has no church body. They don't have a church developed yet. People know that he is a Christian. They know what he stands for. And the community has really accepted him because of the fact that they feel at this point that he's not coming in trying to dupe them or try to
He's taking a
make money off
long
them.
road to build trust, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
a Jeremiah, like whether there's a convert or not, he's just the shining witness. Wow. Yeah, Sandy, did you have anything to add? Did y'all interact with the missionaries or anything?
Yes, and it was really good. When we, during the daytime, we did assemblies for the school. We did a lot of work too, but I mean, like there were set times that all the kids in the school came and we were able to do assemblies for them. And that involved in the daytime a lot of fun, silly things just to get them to get to know us. And then in the evening, we would invite them all back, the entire village, to come back with parents and everyone to do, we did more spiritual things in the evening. And at first in Nulato, they weren't really warm and fuzzy. It just took them a while to really kind of get to know us and get to know our team. It was a little bit different than when we went to Koyuk. They were a lot more warm and welcoming. They have more Christian presence in the gospel there. But what was really nice about Nulato for me is that we really got to bond with the principal and be such a blessing to her. She had just fallen the week prior and slid on the ice and broke her arm. And so she just couldn't do anything. She was so frustrated, and there's so much to be done. So this having people come up from down south that loves the Lord, that could really minister to her and her boys, and then help them out in so many practical ways at the school, and then just being around believers, it was just really nice for her. And then this is another neat thing that the Lord enabled. While we were visiting with her and I got to talk with her a lot, her younger son was going to be in Anchorage the next week at a computer camp at UAA. So I got to go with Pete, and we went to go pick him up while he was in Anchorage, and we brought him to our youth group while he was here, which was a neat opportunity for him because he doesn't have that in Nulato. So
all right, so that was a unique experience with kind of a harder mission front with that, but a ministry of encouragement to missionaries and also the principal. It's interesting. How did Nulato come on the map? What I mean, if it's this hard, how did the door come open?
Well, Nulato's the first village that we ever went to.
Okay.
And Nulato's the one that gave a call.
Like 20 years ago.
1999 was really when the call came in to a teacher here at the school and said, "Would you please come and give our kids hope?" Okay. And so went that year, and it was, there was not a lot of trust, which I get it. Why are you here? What are you doing? And so it took years for them to start trusting trusting our school.
And not to go into the details, but the team that went, prayed, ministered, counseled was there.
Yeah, and it was really just serving. It was really playing with the kids. It was encouraging the kids. It was just loving on them. Basically, the first probably 2 or 3 years.
So it's just continuity of years going to Nulato that when you ask, it's like, we know who they are.
Well, and in 2010 was our 10th year of going to Nulato, 10 years in a row. And they initially, it was not a warm reception at all. As a matter of fact, some people were saying, "You need to leave. Don't stay in the village. Get out, get on your planes and leave." But 10 years later, if you go down to the South Commons down here, you'll see a purple banner with yellow words on there. It says "Hope."
It's the quilt.
It's signed by everybody.
It's the quilt, right?
Yeah,
Isn't it a quilt?
It's a native wall hanging craft. There's some beadwork in there. It's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful, and so that was presented to the team on the 10th anniversary, saying thank you for giving our kids hope.
Wow. Okay, let's move to maybe Koyuk. Yeah, let's keep it in continuity. So the second village, where there was no water, or supposed to be.
There was, the village is split east and west, and the side that we were on, the water was froze. They had no water for like 53 days before we came. And what was interesting, the third grade teacher sent me an email about a week before we left and said, "I don't know if the principal told you, but I want to let you know that we have no water in the school. You can't flush commodes. You can't take a shower. There's no drinking water. And, we want to let you know that because we know if you don't think you can make it because of that." And so I emailed her back and said, "Well, we're coming." And she emailed me back and she said, "Thank you so much for helping us."
Where's this principal from?
He is from the lower 48. His name is Jim, and I forget what his last name is, but
So the open door is student to student, school to school type contact is what I'm picking up on. So it's really beautiful. Go
but
ahead.
he is, and there's another thing, he is retiring, and he's 80 years old. He's been there for 5 years.
Wow.
And so a new principal for that school is coming in as well. So, we talked to him and said, hey, let the new principal coming in, let them know that we want to come back. And so that's another thing to pray for, that God will put in the right person in that school as well so that we can continue to come back.
Right.
But what the difference between Koyuk and New Lotto is you walk into the school, countenances are different. Kids are actually saying, hey, how are you? But then also, and I'll let Sandy talk to this, she saw this, but there is a Covenant Church presence there. We got to meet the pastor who's recovering from strep throat, and so we didn't get to hang out with him much.
Yeah.
But in Koyuk, the last day we were there, I was able to pray with all the kids.
Right.
But New Lotto, that just wasn't going to happen in a group setting.
Right.
So the difference there, and the water thing was not that big of a deal. We had brought water. Actually, New Lotto gave us a bunch of bottled water, and we rationed it out.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, so it was like Survivor. We rationed it out, and some kids we didn't let them have any water. We kicked out of the tribe, so there'd be enough for the rest of us.
Did they have the green headbands or? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
purple,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
And so that was a different setting. So we, in both places, we got to present the gospel. Actually, in New Lotto, we did a creation and the fall of man sort of narrative skit that the kids acted out. And then we did another one, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And so it was really interesting to watch at New Lotto when it was being narrated and acting out, that it just got quiet in the gym and everybody was leaning in. So that was exciting.
Because they would not grow up like in America or whatever, where you just hear the gospel narrative, whether you believe it or not. They're not used to they've never heard that maybe.
Yeah. And another really interesting thing, I've almost forgotten, New Lotto, we had a young lady give her testimony, and one of the elders were there that night of the village, and she shared her testimony, and her testimony was she was an orphan, her and her sisters. Her parents had died in a foreign country, and so she shared her testimony. And afterwards, the elder came up to her and said, thank you for speaking your words. That's really opened my mind. Because her testimony was, where's God? If this has happened to me, where's God? And she shared her testimony, how she became born again. And that really was a valuable tool. God used that.
Yeah, so big difference in the two villages and the atmosphere spiritually. So warm when we got to Koyuk. They knew the gospel. I walked down now this is just a public school, but I was walking down the hallway and I had the opportunity to be back in the kindergarten classroom, and that was fun. And on the wall, it was right around Easter, there are all these Easter eggs, and what is Easter? And all these kids had written about what the true meaning of Easter was and about Jesus Christ. And I was like, oh, wow, look at this. This is really, you wouldn't see this in our public schools. Right. But yeah, so that was a big difference.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense though, because it's a small area with a concentrated amount of kids. So if a message is dominant in the village, it's going to permeate, which is kind of like our school here. Anyway, yeah. Well, let's talk about the other trips a little bit.
All right. Well, Gamble. Again, Gamble's very, very remote. I mean, you're 35 miles from the coast of Russia, so it is out there, and you may have heard probably about 3 months ago when some Russian nationalists came over in a boat, small boat. Do you remember hearing about that? And they got picked up. They landed on Gamble, so we got pictures of the boat if you want to see it. But anyway, so they now are seeking asylum in the United States, but they were fleeing because they did not want to serve in the Russian army. They did not want to go to Ukraine, so they are like, no, we're leaving. So they
fled to Gamble.
They fled to Gamble, yeah, about 250, 300 miles by a little boat. So
wow,
yeah. But Gamble's a Siberian Yupik community. There's a Presbyterian church there. It's the biggest of the four villages. It's about 700 people, so it's a pretty good size. Their schools, probably about 150 in their school, so a K-12. So it's big village. They have a kind of a Head Start program for little ones, and our two biggest kids, let's see, 6'4" and 6'3", they went over and worked with the little Head Start kids, for 2 days, and just had a wonderful time with them. So it was hard to get them to leave. So
Who's the relationship? Don't you have a relationship with a young man who is a basketball?
Yeah. We have friends that are in Gamble. A couple of friends that we just met through the years, and one is our friend Wallace. Lana says he's her favorite son. So, but he's just a neat young man. He graduated from Gamble High School and then went down to pursue a basketball dream in college, and went and played at Multnomah. And so he finished up his time there. He had an extra year of eligibility because of COVID, and so he is getting his master's degree. I think he's 2 weeks away from having his master's from Multnomah, right. And he went back to Gamble, and he's looking to start a YouTube channel on life in Gamble and be there. So, but he's a solid believer. He's a neat young man. He really is. So
you're able to encourage him.
Yes,
While you were there,
and it was interesting as we did our spiritual assemblies there in Gamble. Wallace was there watching and there with us, and afterwards he told us his little cousin was there riveted just watching as we're sharing the gospel and doing these assemblies, and so he said that he's looking forward to having conversations with his cousin as to what he saw and what he thought and basically help share, the good news of Christ with his family. So it's pretty cool.
So let me ask the Bertheumes, and Lana too, but what is the connection? Once you've been to a village, you've done skits, you've lived life, you've maybe met some needs, you've interacted on a personal level, you've preached. What's the heart connection? What remains afterwards? Is there any ongoing connection, or is it just...
Yeah. I guess I'll answer this one. So the high schooler students that we had on our team from Grace Christian School, they were the ones that are on the ground, involving with the kids, and they were building relationships that whole time, right? They were just playing basketball, they were playing games, involved with them, having conversations. And I don't know if I've heard any stories, but it's a common thing for the students to often sometimes keep in contact with these, and hopefully in the future, right, come back and get to talk with a lot of these same kids. So there was good relationship established there, particularly in Gamble, because there had been previous trips there before. So that village was very warm to receiving us. The kids were very excited. They always wanted to be around us at all times. And home life is very rough in that village in particular. So they didn't want to be home either. So there was wonderful conversations and opportunities that came up from that. And it was particularly hard, I think, on our high school students on the team because they had spent the first half of that week investing so much with these students, and then to see the kids cry as they're leaving and things like that. It was a challenging thing for them, but there was wonderful conversations and wonderful opportunities built there. I got the contact of Wallace, who Randy mentioned is there just as someone to support in the future because he had an interest in leading Bible studies or just sowing the word more through his time there. So there was wonderful relationships established, and it's kind of how 3 John presents the gospel advancing, right? It begins with hospitality and the representing the love of Christ to these kids, and through that, just organic opportunities pop up to share the gospel and through the spoken word. We had amazing opportunities in Gamble in particular. Yeah.
It looked like there was some church service footage in some of those. Was that one of them in Gamble, or was that?
That was McCoriac. That was the second village. So, yeah.
So would you say Gamble or McCoriac? I mean, the 2 island villages was one in particular more Christianized than the other? So describe that.
Yeah. So in Gamble, the school had already been to that village before. It's just due to COVID, it had been a 5-year gap.
Right.
But the kids, we would hear the Christians are here. The Christians are here. So the
Grace Christians
Christians were here. So they knew who we were and why we were out there and stuff.
Right.
But going to McCoriac, we came in and all the kids were like, "Are you from Bethel?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, oh, okay, why are you here then?
Right.
But they had a church there already, and it was kind of like the school you're talking about in Koyuk. There was He is Risen, because it was near Easter. He is risen on the walls of the school.
Right.
As much as it was a public school, the church was still involved, and majority of that village went to the church in the village. Right. And so that's where we presented the gospel in both places. And in both places, the kids, again, in an area not knowing or hearing it all the time, were just captivated via the skits or all the high schoolers sharing their testimonies. Specifically in McCoyuk, though, it was more familiar for them.
Right.
And that is where Randy got to do a morning service on Sunday, and then Ethan got to do an evening service. And we got to just be there, support them, love them, engage with them, and be a part of their. It was very sweet in their evening service, kind of like this. At the end of this, there's a whole hour of sharing time. So there it is, a mic at the front, and anyone can come up and share and sing their hearts out. It was so precious because it's such a small village. Right. So they have the time to do that, but it was so precious to see even like the eldest people in their villages stepping up and singing their hearts out and praying. And is it Yupik? Chupik. Is it Chupik? There's Chupik.
Right. So everybody's speaking English, but there is the other dialect. Talk about.
As soon as we got to Macoriac, we got invited to a women's Bible study.
Okay.
And the women, of course, just the women. So there was four of us. Four? And this elder in the community who had some really hard things happen just right before we got there, which I think God really showed me that He's always at work and He's got a plan, and we see the tip of the iceberg of what He's doing, but just to get a glimpse of what God's doing and the timing of why we're there and who we get to be, who we get to bring encouragement to, just because God ordained that we came when we came and when it was needed. But I know what was meaningful to the high school girls and to myself was when this lady closed in prayer at the end of this Bible study, and first thing she says is, Quiana Jesus, you know all languages. And then she proceeded to pray in Chupik. And so we could only understand that she said the number 17, which was the number of people on our team, including the pilots and the kids. And Quiana is like a greeting, and it's also thank you. But just over and over again, she was thank you, Jesus. She was so grateful, and she prayed in her own language. And I know Brendan Edwards and I were just bawling because it was such a, knowing the things that she had been enduring and trusting the Lord for, and a member of her family in her own house had made not a suicide attempt, but a cry for help in that he shot himself, but he was a hunter, so he knew where not to hit.
Wow.
But he's in critical condition. He knows the Lord. Anyway, long story. But that was really meaningful and impactful to me in that just being able to see and know that God is always at work, and He just wants to have us play a part in what He's doing.
That's what it sounds like. And when you say elders, you're talking about tribal elders. These are people who
this lady was probably like late 70s, early 80s.
That's part of the tribalism. You've been there.
Chupik was her first
elders.
language, and that's when she was praying for this group of ladies. She was praying in a different language, but we could tell where her heart was.
Right.
One of the things that is very common throughout all of Bush, Alaska is people want to keep their native tongue alive. They want to speak. They want native speakers, and that's getting less and less as people get older and people are dying off. In Macoriac specifically, it is a bilinguistical school. In other words, half of their school day is in English, half of their school day is in Chupik. So they want to really build this and really get their children to understand the language. So, yeah, it was pretty powerful.
Well, I mean, as I hear this, I think the word, Lana, you just said participation, and even at the front end of our conversation, how did these mission doors open? You know, some of it is the continuity of the history of love and investment that's been year after year after year. I mean, would you say 1999 was when
Right,
the first
yep.
team went to New Lotto? That's now a long time ago. And so for us to be kind of reviving this mission strategy is exciting, but it is just in the flow of continuity of faithfulness and participation. I mean, I don't think anybody's trying to, there's no agenda. There's no practical agenda. All I can think of, and I wrote in that blog that I wrote on missions, kind of in light of you guys going out, is that, there's just some things that typically take place in missions. And you'll have, ascending, you'll have, praying for people that are going, and we kind of did that. And then there's engaging people and open doors and preaching, and there's that. There's the idea of spiritual warfare. It sounds like in the different variety of villages, you had levels and degrees of that, and seeds that are sown. My hope is that seeds are sown and people are saved, but also long term that they will be growing under the ministry of the word. And so any ways that the Lord, it doesn't sound like there's necessarily a practical step for us to take right now in terms of training or sending or ministry to a preacher or, in that way, because I've got a big heart for training preachers and seeing pulpits strengthen. But the early engagement of missionaries, of principals, and of going to church and encouraging pastors, one that had strep throat, so you really couldn't. I mean, that's kind of in my mind where I could see long-term stability, stabilize. There's short-term missions and faithfulness, and then long-term stability in the villages with strong churches and strong pulpits.
Well, and I think there's all kinds of ways to minister to people in Bush, Alaska, and Bush, Alaska, in my opinion, only is one of the most amazing places to live, and it's one of the most difficult places to live at the same time. And there's all kinds of opportunities that come up from flooding. Now's the time when we'll see how the flooding goes on the Yukon. But it's just there's all kinds of ways that we can help. To minister, to encourage, even being a place where people can come when they're in Anchorage and they can come to church, or maybe there's a place where people could stay with them for a couple of nights,
they know
or
us.
yeah,
That's
or some rides, or so the more you build those relationships, the more you deepen that, the stronger it is. There's one of the girls from Macoriac. She is graduating this year. She's the only graduate in the village. 200 people in Macoriac. She's the only graduate, but she and a friend led a song at the evening service, and she plays the guitar very well, and she has a great voice, and we were just like, wow, this is amazing. And so she's going to come, and I guess she's going to do ANSEP at UAA here this summer, but then she's going to take a year and go to a Bible college just to get a stronger foundation to come, and then she wants to come to UAA and pursue her degree. So, I mean, even just, hey, we're here. We can, be a help to you. We can, you can come to our church. We'll give you rides. We'll just be an encouragement to you. All of those things are very real. Anchorage is, obviously the biggest city in the state. And people come here for all kinds of things. So,
and what you're saying again is you're putting the accent mark on providence. It's unpredictable in a lot of ways. I mean, the tragedy that elder lady was talking about, and in that home, and even the water shortage in Koyuk, and then the principal who broke her arm. I mean, there's a pastor with strep throat. You can't predict why things are happening the way that they are, but you just go into the flow of what God opens up. And Ethan.
Just on that note of providence, I really wanted to share this with you guys tonight, because this was something that came up that was really cool in Gamble in particular. Maybe a bit of what I observed from these trips is there is this strange tension to navigate where we want to build relationship with these villages. We want to bring hospitality. We want to do that, and that's not something that happens overnight. It's slow. But as we do that, the only thing that is a sufficient hope for them is the gospel, right? And so the tension there is, well, we shouldn't be ashamed of the gospel because that alone is the power for the salvation. But then you have this other end where by nature the gospel is a stumbling block. It's folly, right? It's offensive. And so it's up to the Lord's providence to open those doors, as Paul says to pray for, right? Colossians 4, he says, pray that there's an open door for the spoken word, right? To bring that. And at Gamble in particular, this was all just his providence. There is a vice principal there who's a believer. And he was the one that brought up to us, hey, do you have any gospel material we can do before the school? And we normally, in the past, have never done that before, it seems like. If I'm right, Randy, that was the first time this happened on any trip, right? Yeah. Yeah, during the school day, because normally we really want to be careful about honoring separation of church and state, but the school gave us full approval for a school assembly. They called the whole school there together, 150 students, and let us do a gospel skit and then a gospel presentation and explanation afterwards. Wow. Before all these kids. And as I was looking at their faces as I was going on, they were engaged and they were hungry for this because there was such terrible sin these kids had to endure, or the terrible suffering that was going on. We heard stories and things like that. So they were so eager for that hope, and they understood this. Oh, wrath of God. Yeah, just these concepts that were coming out of that. I saw them nodding for those things, and that was incredible that came out of that. And that's just all
so
providence.
Wrath of God and probably grace of the gospel too.
Well, yes, and then it led to that.
Right.
But what we're saved
great.
from, of course, right? So
Yeah.
as we were going through that, so it just we wanted. That's
it's
an
just
amazing,
super exciting to hear
opportunity, yeah.
that. And I'm glad you shared
And in that situation, the principal was a little bit hesitant, but they figured it out. They made this kind of announcement that if you want to leave before the spiritual emphasis or the religious part,
Right.
you may leave. And so our friend Wallace had to leave, and I say, Wallace, pray that nobody leaves. And I think one person walked out, so they all heard the gospel message. And I just was so pleased because at the store that we went to, there were signs up for the church. I guess there's a Seventh-day Adventist church there too, but I didn't really see any evidence of that. But the Presbyterian church, brand new, beautiful building, no
Right.
pastor, and they had Easter services, and then that's it. So I was kind of encouraging Ethan that he'll be the pastor in Gamble someday, or Wallace. Wallace might be too. So
Right.
anyway, because you never know what God's doing. But
We're playing the long game.
What's that?
We're playing the long game.
We are.
Speaking
You
of
are.
long, we got to wrap.
Yeah.
But,
All right. This is the long game. Go ahead.
Did you have one
Oh.
final comment?
One final comment. Boy, I don't know if I have one final comment. I think probably the impact, I think, is easily equal to, but probably greater in us, in our kids, in our
Right.
people, as those that we're with. I think there is impact. I think it's a wonderful thing, but I think it changes our thinking. It changes our mind. It changes our view of our state and our world, and just really puts a hard call for sharing the gospel with people. So it's real positive. So our plan is to continue to go back and go to these 4, hopefully, and if we can go to others, we can.
So there's potential for that it could.
Oh, there is
more.
potential, but it's how big of a chunk can you bite off? So anyway, but yeah, that's our hope and our prayers.